Welcome into episode 229 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins improved to 2-0 on the young season with a 3-2 win over the Nashville Predators at the TD Garden. How are you guys? And how does it feel that the Bruins are, so far so good? Everything looks pretty good so far.
I'm okay, battling through a little bit of a mini cold, but I think we'll be fine. As for the Bruins, I think we can just go right into our opening shifts, and mine is about the power play, which we saw a lot of special teams both ways, and I'm sure we'll get into both the power play and penalty kill. But I think it's a really encouraging sign to see the Bruins' top power play unit get going with a pair of goals Saturday, both scored by James Van Riemsdyk. But even just goals aside, I think you saw better movement from that unit. And in a season where we all think goals are going to be harder to come by than they were last year, you're going to need your power play to be consistent. As good as last year's team was, let's not forget, second half of the season, the power play went cold, like really cold for basically a 2-month stretch. That can't happen this year because I don't think you're going to have the 5-on-5 offense, the 3-4 line depth, to just outscore teams at 5-on-5. So the top power play unit was a little sloppy. Game 1 on Wednesday, much better. Game 2, and it doesn't have to be 2 goals every night because that's not realistic. But I do think they're going to have to pretty consistently produce and not go through any sort of prolonged slumps. So Saturday, a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and mine is kind of related. So I wanted to talk about James Van Riemsdyk, who you mentioned scored twice, once on the power play. And he's someone that is obviously new to the team. We thought that he was going to have that role net front on the power play, and we've already seen it pay dividends for him, even strength as well as on the power play. So he already has as many, I think he already has as many power play goals as he did last year. So his offensive output is potentially from that spot going to really help the Bruins. And to what he can do, even strength, I really do like him with Zacha and Pasternak so far. That line has been one of the lines I don't think has struggled or lacked chemistry through the first 2 games. So I think that's a positive sign for them, just how well he's been fitting in there.
Yeah, Van Riemsdyk had 2 power play goals all last season on obviously a bad Flyers team that had a bad power play, and matched that total just on Saturday night alone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure Tortorella was running the umbrella last year on the power play for Philly, so their top unit wasn't very great. But yeah, I mean, naturally, I'll be the one to kind of just, I suppose, have an opening take and more of a, not pessimistic, just a little bit. It's just something I've just been feeling all off season, and that is I just don't believe that Charlie Coyle is longed for a top 2 center role, mainly because it's a lot to ask of him to shut down an opposing team's top 2 center or top 2 line in and of itself. I think he's capable of doing that from a defensive standpoint, but at the same time, I think it's going to be a challenge for him to play an offensive role for not only himself but a facilitator for DeBrusk and Marchand on that line. And I just think that whether it's obviously the sexy idea is to put Poitras there, right? But it just can't be Coyle, I think, long term for this team to have success in the postseason if that's what their goal is, right? So I just think that for me, he's better slotted as a third line center. If Charlie Coyle is your third line center, your team is just a lot deeper. And I fear that, to no fault of his own, because he's hustling, he's trying, and he's playing well, but good for Coyle isn't good enough in that role, because you can't just get by defensively in that role. You have to help make the players around you better and help them produce. And Marchand and DeBrusk, they need to produce. And if Coyle's not the guy to get that out of them consistently, I think the Bruins need to consider moving him back to a more natural position as third line center at some point this season, probably sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the way that they're using that line that's like their checking line, like their matchup line. Marchand, Coyle, DeBrusque are seeing a lot of the opponent's top line. Against Chicago, it was the Connor Bedard line. Against Nashville, it's the Ryan O'Reilly line. And they're getting a lot of D zone starts. And it's like, for Coyle, that's similar to what he did last year as third line center. That's how his line with Taylor Hall and Trent Frederick was used last year. It is how we've seen a Patrice Bergeron line used in the past, but obviously the difference is that Bergeron was such a good two-way player that he could handle those tough matchups and D-zone starts, and that line would still generate a bunch of scoring chances. You're right that, like, I don't think Coyle can do both. If he's going to be using like a shutdown role, then it should probably be on the third line, because you don't want Marchand and DeBrusque just buried in tough matchups all the time, spending a lot of time in their own zone, which is kind of what's happening so far. So, on the one hand, like, it is freeing up their other lines, like, just to go to advanced stats corner here. The Bruins' other three lines, all 66% or better expected goals for percentage. Basically, like, all the Zaka line, the Poitras line, the Beecher line, all getting like at least 2/3 of goal opportunities when they're on the ice. That's great. The Coyle, Marchand, DeBrusque line, 43%. Like, again, it's very early. It's a very small sample size. But unless the other three lines are all going to, really put up some points and produce, I just think that's sort of a waste of Marchand and DeBrusque's offensive talent. And at some point, you're going to want to get those guys into more offensive situations. So I'm kind of with you, especially with this, with the short 9-game sample of Poitras. It does make sense to me to try that at some point and give a Marchand, Poitras, DeBrusque line not just a look, but give them offensive opportunities, and then have Frederick, Coyle, Geeky sort of be that checking line that gets some tougher matchups.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I predicate what I'm about to say, because I completely agree with both of you, but I want to predicate that on saying that Charlie Coyle isn't playing bad hockey. He's just not a fit there, right? Charlie Coyle has been playing great on the penalty kill. He's been working really hard. He's not a bad hockey player, but just when you put him next to Marchand and DeBrusque, you just need to have someone in that position that's more of a playmaker. Not that Charlie Coyle can't be that, but he's not like that at the level that he needs to be to keep up with those two. So I don't think he's terrible there, but I do think they have a better solution in Poitras available, at least to try. I haven't seen anything from Poitras that would make me think he wouldn't be a good fit there. In fact, in the preseason, he and DeBrusque got some time together, as well as him and Marchand getting time together, and they looked pretty good together. So try it for sure. Short sample size for Poitras, but he has a more similar skill set to a Krejci than Coyle does. Like, and Krejci's one of the best playmaking centers the Bruins have ever had. So if you're trying to put someone that can make plays to set up Marchand and DeBrusque, try him. I'm here for it. I want to see it. I think it could work well. As I already said, I think he's sticking around for longer than the 9 games. So if it works after, trying it once or twice, maybe roll with it and see if it can be a long-term line for you. And then that kind of solves your situation where you do move Coyle back into that more natural third line center role. But I do also want to say, and I think that, Brian, this is something you wanted to talk about as well. Brad Marchand has been playing like a pest, like he kind of like vintage Brad Marchand. And I kind of feel like he's been taking himself out of games a little bit. So I don't know if all the blame on that line can go straight to Coyle. I just want to hear what you guys have to say about, maybe some other faults that might be slowing that line down a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that Coyle hasn't played bad, because he hasn't. He's played well. It's just the fact of the matter is he has a ceiling, and that ceiling isn't high enough to be a top 2 center, because there's going to be times throughout the year where guys are slumping, and if Marchand's in a 10-game slump, scoreless slump or DeBrusque's in a big slump? Is Charlie Coyle that guy who can make something happen out of nowhere and catapult them into point, scoring points and feeling better about themselves? No. Like Patrice Bergeron could do that. Matt Poitras is a player where you can see him creating something out of nothing. Martian hasn't scored in 10 games, scores a goal. Now he's feeling good about himself. The problem with Coyle is that there's just a lack of high-end offensive production. There's a lack of consistency there in a top 6 role. It's not that he's not capable of making plays now and again, but a top 2 center can't make plays now and again. You have to make them on a consistent, gamely basis. Even if you're not converting all the time, you have to be creating chances. So your question about Marchand, I think he's had definitely again, it's 2 games, but he doesn't seem to have that the puck's on a stick, something's about to happen, which is usually the case with him. So it might just be a matter of creating chemistry with Coyle, and you're right. There's been a lack of discipline. I mean, last game against Nashville, I want to say there was, give or take, correct me if I'm wrong, about 400 penalty minutes in that game.
Yeah.
So it was clearly a parade to the penalty box, and it's one of those situations where the second period in particular, the Bruins probably spent, in all seriousness, what seemed like half the period on the penalty kill, and then Brad Marchand goes and cross checks Gustav Nyquist in the ribs after a play, and it's like, this isn't 2010 where you're trying to make a team. You were just named captain of the Boston Bruins in their 100th season. Play like it. So yeah, I think it's a combination of Coyle's ceiling isn't there offensively to help those guys, and it's just been a slow start for those 2 wingers driving to the net maybe.
Yeah, the Martian thing, it's like, yes, Nyquist sold it a bit, but you just can't put yourself in position to even give the ref a chance to make the call, to even give Nyquist a chance to pretend he's hurt. Like, even though Martian has a C on his chest, he's still not going to get the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, to reiterate what you guys said, like, Dahlin's not playing poorly. I mean, Coyle's only been on the ice for 1 goal against so far. He got a ton of penalty kill minutes Saturday, but at the end of the second period, he actually had exactly as much shorthanded ice time as 5-on-5 ice time. So in that sense, it was just a weird night for any line to really find much rhythm. So, definitely don't want to like overreact too much, but again, I think I would be more willing to just kind of let it ride and see what happens if it wasn't for the fact that like you have a decision to make on Poitras now within the next 7 games. And it's like, I mean, so far I think he's clearly doing enough to stay anyways. So I'm not super worried about it. But if there's at all a chance that they're thinking about sending him back, like I think it'd be a disservice to not give him time with Marchand and DeBrusque and see what he looks like there.
And to that point, they did do that a little bit in the first game. Like we saw Jim Montgomery rotate lines a lot more in the first game than he did in the second game. And Marchand did get shifts with Poitras at different points in the first game. So like it is something that I think he's very tempted to try. Maybe do it for a whole game. Just, get a longer look at it than he did in game 1.
Well, it's also going to be interesting if he does do it now. Now they're out on a road trip, so you don't have last change. If you do it at home, you can potentially sort of pick and choose your matchups with that line. Now you go on the road, other teams could put whatever line they want to out against that. If they want to say, hey, we're going to throw our number 1 center out against Poitras and really test the kid, like now you're open up to that. The other thing there, though, is that they're not exactly facing the cream of the crop. I mean, you have
playing the Sharks. You do
have the
last.
Yeah, you do have the Los Angeles Kings this coming Saturday, so that's a real test, and especially at the center position, that's one of the deepest teams down the middle in the league. But yeah, other than that, like Sharks can't really give you a whole lot of a test. The Ducks, the Blackhawks, and then the Ducks again. It's like, and even the Blackhawks and Predators to start. We talked about the Blackhawks, but it's the same thing about the Predators. They're not a very deep team. Like once you get to the third, fourth lines, there's a lot of like, who is that guy? Like, where'd he come from? And so I think that's thrown because like I'm looking at, I mentioned like some of the advanced stats for the Coyle line. I'm looking at like the Poitras Frederick Geeky line. So far, when they've been on the ice this season, the Bruins are out attempting opponents 25-10. And you look at that and you're like, wow, that's excellent. Like, terrific. And then you look at who they face, and it's like, well, they're facing third and fourth lines of the Blackhawks and Predators, which are not the best third and fourth lines they're going to be facing. So, this is like, there's a lot to break down the Bruins so far, but there's also a lot of grains of salt you have to throw into all this because they've faced two teams that don't throw the deepest offenses at you.
That's true, but the fact of the matter is, as you alluded to, that's their schedule for much of the first month of the season. Certainly, Poitras' 9-game trial, they don't have a ton of deep teams on the schedule, so it is what it is. And I just think that I understand why Zacha and Coyle were 1-2 going into the season, but nobody saw Poitras pushing like he did, and the fact that he has changed the entire landscape. And I just think that clearly, though he's only played 2 NHL games, we've watched him in camp. When somebody is a playmaker and a game breaker when you see it, especially at that age. And he is just that. He's only going to get better and better. And I just think that Coyle right now, given the Poitras, explosion onto the scene, he's a force right now. He's a force to be in that second line center role with Marchand and DeBrusk, and we also know that he has chemistry with Frederick. So it just seems like a natural opportunity to see what Poitras can do in this moment. And you, like I said, Frederick and Coyle have the chemistry. We don't think he'll ever make that with Marchand and DeBrusk, simply because there's a caliber difference there offensively with those players. And so I think there's an opportunity there, like you guys mentioned, for Poitras to get in there. And hopefully, like I said, if Charlie Coyle is your third line center, it doesn't matter who you're playing, because now you're matching center depth with the best in the league. Obviously, Poitras is not an established number 2 guy, but if Coyle's in your third line center, it's all of a sudden it's just a better situation for the team overall. Any follow up on that before we move along to some of the specifics from the Predators game?
Yeah, so I think that just to stick with Poitras, I want to hear all of your opinions on specifically how he played in game 2, because we gave him really good grades for game 1. And I think that he took a little bit of a step back in game 2, but still definitely on pace to stay with the team. He had some miscues, but then which we expect. We don't expect him to be perfect. He had some turnovers, but then he always seemed to recover. So that is what you want to see from him. He actually, I think he saved a goal at one point in the third. He grabbed a puck right off the post, which kind of ended up there because he turned it over, but he ended up turning back around, taking the puck pretty much off the goal line and saving it. So that's what you want to see. He's, at least going and getting the puck back, and it didn't end up in the back of the net after a turnover because he worked his butt off to make sure it didn't end up there. He did have some pretty good plays made. I think the special teams game, because there was so much of it, made the night a little bit choppy for him, because he does get time on the second power play unit, but he's not on the penalty kill a lot. And a lot of the time in that game was spent on the penalty kill for the Bruins. So definitely not as good as his first game, but still no means does it make you go, oh, maybe he's not ready.
Yeah. And maybe it wasn't as good, but I still thought it was a really solid game. And I thought that line looked good. I thought Trent Frederick had a really strong game. I thought Geeky looked pretty good. One thing that's impressed me with Poitras that, obviously we talk about all his poise with the puck and, puck support, kind of always being in the right position. I also see him at the net front a lot, which has been a huge point of emphasis from Jim Montgomery. Really he wants 2 forwards going to the net front for any shot from the point. And I feel like I've seen Poitras there pretty consistently, making an effort to get there for whether it's screen, tips, rebounds. And there's a few.
He was there for a tip chance last game, game 2,
Yeah.
I should say. Him and Frederick tend to be the ones that are right there near the net.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed Geeky there too. I think that line in general has done a really good job of it. Obviously, that's one of Van Riemsdyk's strengths, which we'll get into. He's another guy you see there. But yeah, I mean, for a smaller guy like Poitras, obviously he's still in that mode of trying to do everything he can to make the team. But it's like it's at least a really it's really encouraging to see him doing it, because I think there's still some other forwards who aren't being as aggressive getting there and are maybe hanging a little off to the side at times, but he has definitely not been one of them.
Yeah. I think, Bridget, to answer your question, and you alluded to it, the special teams, there's no rhythm. I mean, from the puck, the time the puck dropped to start that game, the refs were just trying to become famous. And while I agree, a lot of the calls maybe technically by the 2023 NHL rulebook may have been penalties. Just what are you doing calling 8-9 penalties per team? It's just you're totally killing the rhythm of the game. That said, he is on the second power play unit for Boston, so he wasn't totally iced out. But the simplest way I can answer that question is game 1, they're down 1-0. He gets a secondary assist, as Scott mentioned. I believe you alluded to him pulling up in the Chicago game. That is he is the reason that goal ended up in the back of the net. Fast forward to game 2, he draws the penalty on Lauzon to get the Bruins in the power play through hard work, and the Bruins tie the game. So both games so far this year, they're down 1-0, and because of Matt Poitras' initiative in one way, shape, or form, they tie the game. So he's impacting the game. So did he play a perfect game in game 2? No, nobody in the Bruins did. So that's all you can really ask for. He's impacting each game in a positive way, and he's getting his team on the board, or helping them get on the board. And not every Bruin can say that so far this year. In fact, he's the only really one. So I think just it's very impressive so far.
The only thing that I will say that I forgot to mention earlier is just that the face-off percentage was not good. It was below 30%. So that needs to get worked on, obviously. And that's really more of just a getting reps against NHL players kind of thing, I think. So that was kind of the only thing that I noticed on the stat sheet from him that I was like, oh, that's not great. Because the Bruins, they did lose the battle face-offs against Nashville. So I went back through and I'm like, okay, let's see who brought the numbers down, and Poitras was pretty low on that list. So
yeah, he was 2 for 7. He was good on face-offs in the preseason, though. He was really good in the OHL last year, so not going to be too worried unless that kind of drags on and becomes a longer issue. Yeah, if you guys want to switch gears, I think now's we've touched on special teams breaking up the game and making it hard to judge 5-on-5, but let's talk about the special teams themselves, because we mentioned the 2 power play goals, the penalty kill. Also had another very good game. Nashville had 7 power plays, and Bruins killed all 7 of them. So Jeremy Swayman was excellent. The Predators did get chances. It certainly wasn't a perfect penalty killing game, but Swayman was great. And then at the other end, both times it's Van Riemsdyk going to the net. One, he gets it kind of low at the doorstep and makes a quick move looking for a pass to Pasternak back door, and it goes in off a Nashville defender, which, you can say that's a little bit lucky, but it's a play where you create your own luck, because he's going to the net. He's being aggressive. He's putting the defense on their heels. And then the other one's just a nice deflection. Charlie McAvoy with a good tippable shot, and Van Riemsdyk gets a stick on it for a second. So, because there was so much special teams, it was a game where you were going to have to win the special teams battle. And obviously the Bruins did, with 2 power play goals and a 7-for-7 PK.
Would you classify Pasternak's penalty shot goal also as special teams? On the stat sheet, is that a power play goal on the officially? Is that a power play goal?
No, it doesn't count as a power play. I don't think they technically count as anything because like it doesn't count as a 5-on-5 goal either. So it's a specialty play though, and obviously there was a penalty on it. So
Yeah, well, obviously you named it. I mean, the special teams was the deciding factor in the entire game, both ways. So even Nashville's second goal, I want to say, was on a delayed call. Maybe it was their first goal, but I think it was the second goal. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah. So everything was special teams, and yeah, I mean the Bruins killed off a 4 minute double minor in the second period and really gave Nashville nothing. So it was impressive. I think that yeah, I mean your goalie has to be your best penalty killer, and he was, but it just seemed like there's a lot of speed the Bruins present on the penalty kill with Beecher and DeBrusque and Marchand out there and Coyle's experience. So and on the back end, you have a lot of experience there too with Lindholm, McAvoy, and Carlo and Forbert. Like those guys they know what they're doing on the PK. So penalty kill is strong, of course, and yeah, the power play. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot. There's clearly a lot of havoc that Van Riemsdyk creates down low. In the past few years, you've seen Taylor Hall down there in that front. You've seen Nick Foligno at times, Jake DeBrusque obviously prominently, and there just never seemed to be a true fear from the penalty kill that those guys are going to take it to the net every time or really be a threat. But Van Riemsdyk's range and just natural ability down there, he creates a lot of chaos, and the penalty killers start running around in that box down low, and obviously it opens up seams across ice to Pasternak sneaking down or McAvoy at the top or Marchand. So I mean, I just really like Van Riemsdyk's presence down there, and I think he's exactly what they're looking for. He's going to be very successful there. Zacha looks better in the bumper. The Bruins are starting to do the reverse bumper now, where it's Pasternak trying to feed Zacha, not Marchand trying to feed Bergeron. Obviously, with Zacha being a lefty. So, and I love McAvoy's shot mentality. That's one of his biggest criticisms. He doesn't shoot the puck enough and set the tone. And Van Riemsdyk's second goal, obviously being off the faceoff, McAvoy just did exactly what you're supposed to do. And so both units obviously were very strong.
Yeah, and something I noticed a lot on the penalty kill is just how many block shots there were by the Bruins defenseman. McAvoy had 4, I think. And yeah, McAvoy had 4, Forbert had 3. Everybody but Shattenkirk on the D had at least 1 blocked shot. So everybody was kind of putting their body out on the line for that, getting important clears, and the forwards were a big part of the penalty kill as well. And then power play, obviously they scored. There's still that second power play unit, there's still more to be desired from, for sure. I'm not sure if the personnel on that unit have 100% clicked yet. But as long as you have that first unit going, that's a good place to start. That's your more powerful unit anyway. The Pasternak penalty shot was just sick. I just wanted to bring it up just because you guys already talked about it a little bit, but that was so impressive, and he just shot it from behind him, and no goalie had any chance stopping that. So it was very pretty. Put that on the highlights for the whole season. I bet it will be.
yeah, I mean that release and that shot placement, unstoppable for a goalie. And it's funny because like after the game, Swayman was asked about it, and he said, "Yeah, he does it all the time in practice, and it always works." And then both McAvoy and Pasternak pointed out that he tried it in one of the preseason games and shot it right into the goalie's chest. So it didn't work that one time, but Pasternak said he's been working on it since and went back to it, and obviously had much better shot placement this time. But it's just obviously it's a penalty shot, so it's like a unique specialty thing, but it is sort of a continuation of just the different releases and kind of shots that he's added to his arsenal in recent years, and finding ways to deceive goalies. And like we've seen it on the power play where instead of taking a one-timer that might get blocked, he steps inside and just takes a quicker shot. And he's done it at 5-on-5 too. And that's what's allowing him to. He's always been a great goal scorer. That's what's going to allow him to keep getting even better and consistently be among the leaders is keep developing different shots, different ways to score, different ways to fool goalies. So, as for the power play and Van Riemsdyk being net front, Brian, you nailed it. And like the thing I keep thinking of is you mentioned all those other guys they tried at the net front, and it's like they all did some good things. DeBrusk and Hall have some playmaking ability out of that spot where, if they get the puck low, they can do some good things with it. Foligno had the physicality and, a couple moves he could go to in close, but obviously not as gifted of a playmaker. Van Riemsdyk, it feels like he kind of has it all. Like he's got the good hands down there. He has the hand eye for deflections. He's obviously a big body and he's physical, so he's hard to move out of there. And if he's in a position where he has a shot, he has a good shot in close and a good finish. So, that's obviously one big reason he was brought here. And I already said like they're going to need the power play to be productive, and certainly they have the talent for it to be. Clearly, no matter what you might think about their offensive depth 5-on-5, like they have enough talent to have a really good power play. So it's just about putting it together. As for like the penalty kill, I wanted to touch on too. You mentioned, all the forwards, like the speed. It's also new guys or guys stepping up to more minutes. So for it to already look this good early on is encouraging because let's be honest, it looked bad in the preseason. Part of that was they hadn't really worked on it yet. But part of it was also it's new guys trying to get used to it. And I think you already see, where Beechers ends up at he played like 4 something on the 423 shorthanded. It's obviously new for him. You see Trent Frederick get 3 minutes shorthanded. He was used very sparingly on the penalty kill last year. So kind of a new role for him too. It's going to be more minutes for Zacha there. Coyle is now in year 2 of being a go-to penalty killer. Same with DeBrusk. Last year was sort of the first year that he was really a go-to guy there. So, it's encouraging that it seems to be coming together pretty well so early in the season because I thought that was going to be more of a work in progress than the power play. And so far it's just hit the ground running.
Well, and Montgomery commented in the preseason too how the penalty kill hadn't gotten much practice and they looked pretty brutal. But one last comment on Van Riemsdyk that came to my mind as well is the Bruins. We mentioned Taylor Hall, Foligno, DeBrusk. The one guy we didn't mention was Tyler Bertuzzi because they found their net front guy in the power play last year with Bertuzzi, and he would have been clearly the number one net front guy this year had he re-signed. So obviously him signing in Toronto, you lose that asset. So bringing in somebody, because again, you lost Taylor Hall obviously, and Foligno. So it's DeBrusk or bust really. And I think the Bruins they wanted more options there. And yeah, I think he's not the most explosive guy going after rebounds, beneath the goal line, but because of his range and his reach, he can definitely bring some pucks in and it's just been a good fit. So
he's massive. Like whenever I see him in the locker room, like if he walks in on like still in his skates, dude, I feel like he's like 3 feet taller than me. Like he's big and he takes up a lot of space in front of the net that goalies can't see by. So it's not just that he's good at redirections and grabbing pucks off pads that, rebounds. He's great at screening. So he has the whole skill set of everything you want for a net front guy, not just, the finish there. So maybe he has all 3 of those things where some of the guys you listed just had 1 or 2 of them. And I did, in my mind, kind of laugh a little bit when I remembered that. Do you remember? I'm sure we all remember. Let's not forget the Zdeno Chara net front experience. they tried him net front for a little bit just because he's so big, and they're like, just throw him out in the front of the net and see what happens. that was a failed experiment, but it worked a few times.
Yeah, it worked a little bit. Who was standing in front on Bergeron's tying goal in Game 7 against the Leafs in 2013.
Yeah, it's in all the highlights. He's right there.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, with Van Riemsdyk, it's like, this is just an aside, but I also think about, obviously he's 34 years old now. He's not the skater he used to be, but thinking back to like how intimidating he could be when he was also a really good skater with that size, like the way he moved, it was, you know, you talk about like guys that could really get a defense back in their heels off the rush, and uh, he certainly could, the way he'd attack defenses.
And he used to do it to the Bruins all the time. He was a Bruins killer.
So obviously it's been a good 2 games so far for the Bruins, and I have a lot of positives in my mind. I'm pleasantly surprised that this group of guys, it really is probably 35% turnover, maybe 30 from last year's team, maybe even more, but no, probably around what I said. That said, I want to see how well you guys know me. We haven't discussed this, but if there's one Bruin that Brian would say has been a little lackluster through 2 games, do you guys have any idea who I might say? And I'll start the Jeopardy soundtrack right now.
Am I allowed to ask a question? Or do I just have to guess without any information at all?
I would guess first and then ask a question.
I've got to guess, and I think I might disagree. So,
okay, then I think I know who you're going to say then.
Hampus Lindholm.
Yes, that's exactly who I was going to say. But okay, but here's the thing. So it's not even so much that he's been bad, but I think he sucked in the playoffs, number one. And he didn't really have much of a preseason to speak of. Didn't have to. It's preseason. But I just think that last year, one of the biggest reasons the Bruins had the season they had was because when Charlie McAvoy was out of the lineup for the first month and a half, Hampus Lindholm was a Norris caliber guy. And, he kept it up for the most part throughout the season. I think, what did he finish, like top 7 in voting or top 10? He may have dwindled down as the year went along. My point is, though, he hit the ground running last year. And because of that, the Bruins were able to have the start that they had. And it's almost like, because he doesn't have to be that guy right now, he's not being that guy. And I just want him to play with that same level of play when they have all their horses back there, and not when you just need to be because you're the only guy. And so I would say he hasn't been bad at all, Scott. So I don't know if we're going to really disagree. I have a high bar for him, and I want him to meet it no matter what.
I knew it was going to be a defenseman, and it was between Lindholm and Shattenkirk. So I didn't know if, because I feel like your bar for Shattenkirk was already kind of low, I was also leaning towards Lindholm, just because Shattenkirk's a third pair guy. So it's like, okay, we weren't expecting all that much from him. But I agree, Brian, and in that, for what we saw from him in the beginning of last year is definitely different than what we saw from him so far this year. And in the preseason, so I went to one game. Like, I never get to sit in the stands. I'm always on the ninth floor with Scott. So I went with some friends from college, and I'm sitting there, and there's one point in, I think it was their last home game of the regular season. He just makes this awful turnover and then can't get back on defense, and I'm just screaming. I'm like, what is this? And it was like, just the sense of frustration in the whole crowd was just like, what happened? I think of him as someone that's fast. I think of him as someone who's good in transition. And at times he, at the end of last season and sometimes in the preseason and early in the season, hasn't really been able to bring that to the degree that we saw it in the beginning of last season. So I agree in a way that I think he has more to bring for sure.
Yeah. The first thing I would note is,
I almost feel like to decide how I want to tell you you're both wrong.
Well, no, I almost feel like he did himself a disservice with how good he was to start last year, because at one point he was like a point per game player through like a month and a half. And it's like, this is a guy who's never had more than 34 points in a season. And now everyone thinks he's going to be a great offensive defenseman. And it was like, and I remember saying this at the time, but I was like, I don't think we should expect this to continue, because I just don't think that's really the kind of player he is. Like, when he's been at his best, he's always been a really good two-way defenseman, very good in his own end, very good in transition, and chipping in offensively. not driving the offense and being like a top 10 defenseman in points. That said, like, sure, it's fair to maybe want a little bit more out of him. Part of that, though, is the role that he's being asked to play. It's when it's him and Carlo, they are the Bruins shutdown pairing. And they're the same way I said, like, the Coyle line gets the toughest matchups. This is the pairing that's getting the tough matchups and the D zone starts. And at that, they've been great. Like, I'm looking so far this season, when they've been on the ice, Bruins have out attempted opponents 36-19, basically doubling up. Shots on goal 19-9 Bruins, more than doubled up. They haven't been on the ice for a goal against yet. Scoring chances 20-13. Like, they do that extremely well, but I also understand wanting to see, because we've seen it from Lindholm that he can do more offensively. Yeah, there's probably a happy medium between, basically the no-show we saw in the playoffs offensively, and it's only 2 games, but he doesn't have a point yet. So yeah, like, there's somewhere in between that, but he's not going to be the point per game player he was early on last season. Like, I think that was like a fluke. That was just kind of a career best stretch that he's not going to live up. Like, he's not going to live up to that standard.
But he did pretty consistently. It wasn't like a few weeks. Like, it was over a month. I feel like maybe more like 2 months that he was able to do that. And he looked really, really good. And I wonder, we know that during the playoffs there was an injury involved with his foot. I assume that it's had all the time to heal that it needed. It never needed surgery. It was just something that needed time and rest to go back to normal. So I don't think an injury is involved here. And, also it is early in the season.
I mean,
maybe he didn't get enough work in the off season while he was resting. Maybe, it's just going to be a slow ramp up.
I've completely changed my mind. Scott, I think he's been amazing so far, actually, now that I think about it. No, I mean, Scott, what I would say is, he's been fine. He's been good, actually, defensively, as you mentioned. I'm not even talking about point production. I'm not basing how I think he's playing based off of him being a point per game guy. What I look for with him is the defense, like you mentioned, which has been good, but he's a driver of offense and transition, and his skating ability and his stride is it's top tier in this league. And I'm not seeing him gain that separation from forecheckers that we've seen him do since he's been a Bruin. At least maybe not jumping off the page. Maybe he is. I should go back and watch the film. Unfortunately, I'm not on the Bruins payroll as a coach or a scout, so I'm not going to do that. But I think he's just.
Well, I will say this. So it's fun. It's funny you mentioned that, and I had meant to touch on this, but there was a point in Saturday's game where I was thinking, like, I hadn't seen him doing a whole lot with the puck on his stick. And literally, like, the shift I was thinking that he went behind the net, draws a defender behind with him, does like that quick cut out front and gained separation and started a clean transition. So it now maybe that was the only time. Like, I can't think of him doing that another time in the game other than that. But it was funny, like, just when that thought came into my head that you're talking about, of like, haven't really seen him doing this a whole lot. Literally that shift, like, he did the exact thing that I've been waiting to see. And I was like, oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, exactly. And look, maybe I'm being unfair because I do think I'm carrying over some pent up frustration from last spring and him just being a really invisible player after having that season for them. So it just seems like it's kind of been a snowball effect. And but I just think, look, if the Bruins need to rely on defense and goaltending, and as you mentioned, he and Carlo have been a great defensive pair. So if that's their role, maybe I should just, tamper my expectations for him offensively, but I still want to see him drive play a little bit more than I have so far through albeit 2 games.
They were out there a lot against Bedard, which probably was their toughest task of the whole season. But, and Allmark did help with the fact that Bedard didn't score on a lot of those shifts. But I want to, because time's winding down here for us, I want to look ahead a little bit to next game, as well as to our next podcast, because we are going to have a mailbag segment, because the Bruins have plenty of time off before they play again Thursday. So our middle of the week episode, we're going to be taking questions, mailbag, comment on, YouTube, email us. I always put all of that information in the comments, like how to get in contact with us. That's just a note if you're still listening. And I want to look ahead to next game, or even just the road trip in general. But
also, just in case people don't look at the notes, skatepod@weei.com, or tweet at us at the skatepod, or as Bridget said, comment on the YouTube video.
Yeah, I check the YouTube comments. Every once in a while throughout the day. So, and Scott checks the email, and we all have access to the Twitter. So, I want to look ahead to next game, and I want to get you guys predictions on which Bruin who maybe hasn't quite broken out the offense yet is gonna make a big impact next game. I'm more thinking of the forward group, but if you have a defenseman that you're thinking of that you think is right on the cusp of scoring, and might have a big game against San Jose, I want to hear what you guys think.
I guess I'll go first, Scott. I think maybe the obvious answer would be Brad Marchand, and I'll allow Scott to kind of think of a more of a dark horse. But I would say Marchand. I mean, you're playing San Jose, Los Angeles, and Anaheim, two of which really should be, bottom 10 teams this year. The Kings, obviously, I think have hopes to be a solid playoff team. But if you're asking who I want to see get going here, especially against this type of competition, I think I would say Brad Marchand, and specifically at 5-on-5. But take what you can get.
Yeah, that was going to be my first answer, especially with like the penalty he took Saturday. I could see him kind of just coming back and like having a takeover game, especially against a bad opponent. But I'll say Jake DeBrusk, who I think has been solid so far. Like, I don't think he's done anything wrong, but hasn't exactly jumped off the page yet. We talked about how that whole line has been relatively quiet 5-on-5. DeBrusk doesn't have a point yet, but I feel like, he can take over at any moment. I think he's a more confident player now, so I don't think, going a couple games without a point, like I don't think it snowballs on him anymore like it used to. So I could definitely see him getting going, whether it's San Jose or just on this road trip in general.
Yeah, I'm gonna go bottom six just because you guys are explaining some of the top six options. So two thoughts come to mind. And it's two guys who have never scored an NHL goal, and that's Matt Poitras and Johnny Beecher. So I think that they've both done a lot and have come very close to scoring. Beecher a lot of times in front of the net, Poitras in all sorts of different ways, just scrapping out in front or tipping shots or being sneaky. So his first goal is coming on this road trip at some point. And I also think that Johnny Beecher and the way that fourth line is playing and pressuring and forechecking, they cause a turnover back there behind the net or around the net. And, maybe Lauko taps it in front to Beecher and he puts one in. So I think both of those young guys who haven't scored yet have shown good signs that they're right there.
Yeah, and since it's, I've mentioned it as like something Poitras has to do more, worth noting, he does have 4 shots on goal through 2 games. So, to me, like if he puts 2 shots on goal a game, that's sort of right in the sweet spot. Obviously, even more would be great, but my concern there was like he couldn't be at 1 shot per game or less like he was in the preseason where he went a couple games without a shot. So,
but as we talked about, he was 75% shooting percentage. So,
well, now he's 0% in the regular season.
That's true. But he had a great percentage in the preseason.
All right. So, any final takeaways from the games that have been and the games coming up, guys? Obviously, the Bruins are off until Thursday night where they play San Jose. It's a 10:30 start. So, obviously, we have today's episode on Monday. We have Wednesday's mailbag episode, and then we'll be recording Friday. We'll be dropping Friday. So, any lingering thoughts thus far before we close out?
No, not for me. I think, I mean, we haven't talked much about goaltending, but would just note Allmark and Swayman, both good starts so far. Swayman obviously faced more volume of shots, and, Allmark did face some quality chances. Swayman faced more of them with all the penalty kill time. But, you know, I don't know like why this is happening, but for some reason, in some places, there's already this narrative that they're gonna have to pick a goalie at some point, and I'm like, yeah, but not now, and not at any point before like maybe the last month of the regular season. Like, why are we trying to pick a number one goalie? You know, a week or two into the season, like we know the rotation is very good. We know they're gonna have to rely on goaltending, probably even more this year to win games. So if they're both gonna be really good again and through one start each, they have been, then just keep rotating. Like that's a strength. That's not a weakness that you have to try to solve and ride one of them.
No, there's a reason they won the Jennings. So
That's for me. That's not an argument until April. I don't need a number one goalie from now until then. The playoffs is a different story because carryover is a real thing. Playing with confidence. If a guy's feeling it, I just don't love taking him out of there. But again, that's a conversation for months from now. As far as the regular season goes, I don't care if they put Scott in every third game. That's fine with me. So as long as these guys are rested, I just think the game is changing where goalies do need to monitor how many games they play. And when you have two number one goalies, absolutely just keep splitting all year. I can care less.
They better stay out of the box the game that I'm in there, because I got to tell you, I don't do well with a lot of traffic around the net. So
yeah, you have to battle look through some legs to find out so you're not screened, Scott.
Look through the Zdeno Chara screen.
Fight
your way around it.
Speaking of goalies, I know we're getting out of here, but Scott, I got to commend you for you dying on your sword there, trying to get Tim Thomas on this all centennial team. So, Bridget, I don't know if you saw the video the Bruins put out, but there was also a hilarious moment where trying to think who it was. Was it
Brad Park?
Brad Park, and like they're all going around the room like, "Yep, unanimous." And all of a sudden, you just hear Scott in the background. He's like, "I actually want to further discussion," and everybody's like a huge pop. Everybody's like totally like caught off guard and surprised. And
it's like when everybody wants to go home from work, it's like 5:00 and Scott's like, actually, I have another assignment we need to fix right now.
No, well, first off, that was very early.
Scott reminded the teacher in 5th grade that they had homework last night.
Well, you know what's weird though? Like, so I guess like I sort of get that reaction to Brad Park, but someone moved Brad Marchand into further consideration and didn't get that reaction. And I was like, am I insane? Like Brad Marchand is way more obvious of a pick than Brad Park. So like, I don't totally get why mine got that reaction, but yeah, it was funny though. Basically my main thing was like, I knew a very good defenseman was getting cut, and I just thought like there were 4 locks and then everything else should have been open to consideration, because the guy who ended up getting cut is Lionel Hitchman, and his numbers hanging in the rafters. So like, I know that's, he played 100 years or 95 years ago, so people don't really know him that well, but like there's a reason his numbers in the rafters. So but yeah, that whole process.
And there's a reason it's called the Centennial team.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that Pasternak didn't get snubbed, because I just think it's one of those situations where you're trying to make a centennial team of a bunch of guys, for the most part, who play their entire career start to finish, and you saw what they did. And for Pasternak, I have little doubt in my mind he's going to end his career, assuming he plays in Boston, which we know he's here for the next 7-8 years, whatever. Like, he's going to be the highest goal scorer in the franchise's history. He'll be probably a top 5 point scorer. So it's just one of those things where, like, if this was 10-15 years from now, if for their 200th anniversary season, he'd be on it. So why not have him on it right now? Like, I forget who it was in the round table, Scott, but one lady mentioned like, you shouldn't punish him for his age. And so I was like, if I think objectively, he's like definitely one of the top, whatever. I'm glad he got on there. So that was good. There weren't many snubs. I mean, it seemed like the guys that should have been on that top 20 list were there. And you guys did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, goalie was definitely by far the toughest spot, just because there's 5 legitimate contenders that all had really good cases, and you know, Frank Brimsek and Jerry Cheevers end up making it, and it's really hard to argue against either one of them. But then, like, Tim Thomas gets left off. He had the best peak of any Bruins goalie. Tuukka Rask gets left off. All he does is own the franchise wins record and playoff wins record. And Tiny Thompson gets left off, who's a Hall of Famer who won 4 Vezina trophies and a Stanley Cup. So, like, that part was hard, but it was
We have a Centennial all goalie team. 5 goalies.
yeah.
I am all for watching goalies play hockey, by the way. Like, throw some out as forwards, but all dressed up in gear. I could watch a whole game of that. There should be a whole league of that. Let's be real.
You know, now that I think about it, in the moment I didn't think of this at all, but just now, I'm kind of surprised there wasn't a little bit of an all Centennial coaching staff or GM. I mean, maybe you can't do GM because Sweeney is active, so and Montgomery is active, but like to assign a coach, one head coach to that team, it would have been a fun exercise too. But I digress. It didn't happen, so it's a moot point, as they say. A moot point, not a mute point. Moot point.
If people don't know what we're talking about, the Bruins posted the link to it. It's a YouTube video that's about an hour long of the selection committee with all the people that were picking the Centennial team, including Scott, who voiced his opinions. And it was his time to shine. He couldn't just sit there and just agree, because, you know, he needed some airtime.
I will say the funniest moment to me, and I'm glad they included it, was Naoko Funiyama I think it was when it got down to Tim Thomas versus Jerry Cheevers, and they like went around and voted, and she didn't vote, and then they're like, Eric Russo was like, "Who didn't vote? We're one short," and she was like, "I can't decide." I thought that was a good moment. Unless you guys had anything else on the All-Centennial team, I have one last thought, just a little shout out to a member of the All-Centennial team, actually. But Zdeno Chara ran the Bay State Marathon in Lowell, actually ran right by my place. Ran that on Sunday. It's the 3rd marathon he's run in the last like 3.5 weeks. And he's running another one in a couple weeks in the New York City Marathon. So he's now run 4 marathons this year, with a 5th on the way, and he set his personal record today in Lowell. So returning to where he was once a Lowell lock monster for about half a season before he got called up by the Islanders. So just incredible. Like, he's just an animal. In some ways, it's like on some like I think this is more impressive than everyone knew, like, how much of a fitness freak he was during his playing career.
Don't say more impressive than him winning the Stanley Cup.
No, not winning the Stanley Cup, but like he was always renowned for how being like a workout warrior and how great of shape he was in, and that's why he played into his 40s, obviously. But now he's just turning into like a regular marathoner at 46, and he said that he wants to do like Ironmans and triathlons too. The guy's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, he's built different. I mean, he's what, 6'9". I mean, 4 marathons in a month. I mean, that can't be good on those knees. You might want to take it easy just a little bit, because those are ticking time bombs if he doesn't lay off those. But yeah, he's impressive as it gets.
He's
very
run
competitive.
He's run enough marathons for all of us. So good job, Zdeno. Now we don't have to.
By the way, another former Bruin might be running the Boston Marathon at some point. When we talked to David Krejci before Wednesday night on the gold carpet walk-in, he said he's been running more since retiring, and he's not going to become Chauer and start doing a bunch of marathons, but he's done a couple half marathons, and he said he thinks he might want to do Boston at some point. So, apparently that's the thing to do if you're either Czech or Slovak former Bruin, is you get really into running after retiring.
And tennis. I think he also mentioned trying to play Wimbledon.
Yeah, I mean, I might start doing marathons. I feel like you can probably run 26 miles around Boston quicker than driving it lately with all this traffic. So I might start becoming a marathon runner as well. But until then, I'll just stick with the skate pod. How's that sound?
Hey, we've been known to do some marathon episodes from time to time.
That is true.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
true.
At like midnight too. If you like finish posting at like 3 a.m., I'm like, thanks guys, this is great.
Not tonight. We'll get out of here nice and early, so you can do that, Bridget, before maybe midnight. So unless there's anything else, thank you all for listening. We will talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.